I guess what I can say first, for all of you who don't know who I am, my name is Henrik Palmgren, I come from Sweden, behind the website Red Eyes Creations. We do radio programs and news updates, tons of other stuff as well. Very thankful for Karen for inviting me. This is my first public talk, by the way, so thank you for Karen for giving me the opportunity to present some of the information about some of this stuff. And I'm going to move quite fast through some of the information, so hopefully you'll be able to keep up. I have tons of slides to show you in terms of the hidden roots of the European Union. There's lots to say, obviously, so much to say, so much information. I will do my best to give you an idea of what we are talking about here. I've chosen to focus on a few things. Mythology, symbols, the founding fathers, the official and unofficial origins, pretty much, of the European Union. The Roman Catholic connection, symbolism of the treaties of the European Union. And all these symbols you see down here obviously are connected to what I'll be talking about. IHS, Jesuits, the international pan-European movement or union, the Knights of Malta, a little bit on Freemasonry, a little bit on Zionism as well. There's a lot of connections here that there's just simply not time to go into. But these are all part of it. The House of Habsburg right there, the Vatican, the Holy See, and the British royal family a little bit as well is some of the things that I'll be touching upon. But let's begin at the beginning of the story, Europa, and talk about the mythology pretty much, and see where the story begins. It goes like this pretty much, that Zeus, king of the gods, saw Europa gathering flowers at the sea. He fell in love with her. He transformed himself into a form of a magnificent white bull and appeared at the seashore where Europa was playing. The great bull walked gently over to where Europa stood. She put flowers around his neck, climbed upon his back, overcoming her fear of the great beast. Suddenly the bull rushed out to the sea, abducting Europa. Zeus took Europa to the Mediterranean island of Crete. And there Zeus cast off the shape of the white bull and back into his human form made Europa his lover. Europa became the first queen of Crete and had by Zeus 3 sons, one of these being King Minos of Crete. She later married the king of Crete, who adopted her sons, and she was worshipped under the name of Helotia in Crete. Zeus also represented, or reproduced rather, the shape of the white bull in the stars. Today we can recognize its shape as the constellation of Taurus. And university professor from Munich, Michael Rappengluck, believes that Taurus is represented in a cave painting at the Hall of the Bulls in the caves at Lascaux in France, dated to roughly about 15,000 BC, which he believes is accompanied by a depiction of the Pleiades. Taurus marked this point of the vernal equinox in the early Bronze Age. This is the age of Taurus we're talking about here. The Pleiades were closest to the sun at the vernal equinox around the 23rd century BC. In Babylonian astronomy, the constellation was listed as the heavenly bull. In Greek mythology, Taurus was identified with Zeus, as we just mentioned, and the myth informs names of the constellation since it's necessary to traverse the area of the sky known as the sea, or the heavens, to reach it. Keep that in mind as well. And this is when passing through the zodiac. It forms the origin of the myth of the Cretan bull and one of the 12 laborers of Heracles or Hercules. So let's just look quickly here at what we are looking at. She came from the ancient world, this Phoenician princess. She travels willingly, or just she's abducted, as it were, by Zeus from Tyre in Lebanon. This is the modern name that we have for it now, over to Crete, the bottom of Europa pretty much. This might be symbolic in one reference as well of the age of Taurus transitioning over to the age of Aries. Keep that in mind as well, we'll touch upon that later. So she came from the land of Canaan, the ancient world. She was a Phoenician princess, as I mentioned today, Tyre in Lebanon. There's a very interesting connection in terms of Tyre as well when it comes to something called Tyrrhenian purple, or royal imperial purple. And there's actually a relationship between the the Minoans of Crete and the Tyrrhenians, and how this was extracted, but we don't have simply time to go into that right now. So here's Europa, the Phoenician princess, the goddess, if you will, depicted on an old map. This is known as theurgy in some circles. You take the goddess, you take some heavenly image in a way and place it over to the physical, onto the physical land itself. And this is kind of representing the completion of that. Allegedly, Charlemagne also was the one who dubbed the continent after Europa. So what's in Crete? As I mentioned, we have the Knossos Palace, magnificent building, sometimes referred to as the Knossos Palace of King Minos, sometimes just called the Labyrinth. I think there's similarity in terms of the words Knossos and Gnosis, or knowledge, if you will. Interesting side note there. And even the idea of the labyrinth could be a veiled term for the brain, actually, if you look at it that way, from the outside, with its all its little shapes and pathways and neural networks, even in one way. So it could be implying intelligence or reasoning or thought, if you will. But look at the snake goddess here. That's what's interesting in this too. This is a Minoan statuette from around 1600 BCE. She's holding two snakes in her hands, in some way implying that she is mastering the snake, in that sense. Could also be knowledge of DNA, by the way. She has a bare breast. This will come up later. Keep that in mind. And just as a side note, here is actually a runestone from Gotland in Sweden, where I'm from, that is very similar. I don't know if everyone can see that. It's down at the bottom there. Very similar to this goddess as well, obviously, holding two snakes and so forth. There is a relationship between many Norse ancient civilizations and the Middle Eastern civilizations as well, I believe. And just to kind of emphasize our point further, Will Durant, who wrote the book The Life of Greece, The Story of Civilization in 1939, said about the Minoan civilization that it's the first link in the European chain, and that just kind of just emphasizes our point of what I'm trying to get to here in that sense. So let's look at the etymology of Europa. She's a watcher in a way, you can say. Eur, meaning broad or wide. Op or opt or opa means eye. So in one way she has big eyes, she's wide gazing, she has intelligence, she's open-minded. In one way she's enlightened because she has these big eyes, as it were. You can even see the kind of bug-eyed look that statue has right there. Pretty creepy, but interesting. The question is then if we can look at Eve actually in the same way. I call her another kind of snake goddess because of the fact that she has a relationship with the snake. She gains knowledge by eating from the fruit or the apples from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So the question I pose here is Eve Europa, because the idea of the Minoan statuette there is that she is probably a depiction of Europa. That same legend is carried over into Crete. So I believe that statue actually is Europa in that sense, and the relationship is to Eve here, the snake goddess of gnosis, gnostic knowledge, etc. The apples of enlightenment comes up in Norse mythology as well. The story of Idun or Idun. She is the guardian, if you will, of the apples, or the fruit of knowledge. She was a wife of Bragi or Bragi, a wise deity related to the moon. So who is Europa anyway, if we ask that question? Protestant minister Alexander Hislop writes in The Two Babylons, 1853, that Semiramis was an actual person in ancient Mesopotamia who invented polytheism and with it goddess worship. I personally don't believe that that's the case. I think goddess worship probably was around before the worship of a god. Before that probably it was animal worship, like the bull, the snakes as we saw, the bear or something. But anyway, let's leave that for now. Just continue and see what he has to say here. Hislop believed that Semiramis was a consort of Nimrod, builder of the Bible's Tower of Babel. Keep that in mind as that come up later as well. He maintained that all divine pairings in world myths and religions depicted in art, like Isis, Osiris, Aphrodite, Cupid, Asherah, Orion, Mary, Jesus, and others, are retelling of that same tale in one way of Semiramis and Tammuz.